Right then guys, here I am for the 26th episode in my Stewart Manager series on Grand Prix World. Like I did for the previous 2 seasons, this video will go through from the Monaco Grand Prix up to and including the Hungarian Grand Prix. In the previous episode, I forgot to go through the news after the Spanish Grand Prix, so that's where I'll start off. Benetton have done a deal with the team sponsor of Murano, and then it's a trio of paid drivers landing seats for next year. Pierre Rainbow will be racing for McLaren, replacing Damon Hill. Ricardo Rosset has bought a race seat at Arrows, and more specifically, it's Wirtz's seat, now that he's joining Stewart. Finally, there's Takaki, who has found another seat, since I'm not willing to keep him on. And amazingly, he's landed one at Benetton. It's difficult to say who he's replacing, since all of Benetton's existing drivers will leave them next year. However, the fact it says Takaki bought a seat implies that he won't be just a test driver, since people don't generally pay for testing roles. Finally, Peter Sauber was named as the fans' least favourite manager in F1, and Ron Dennis somehow got Manager of the Month. Given that a Ferrari driver won the Spanish Grand Prix, and given that Stewart scored 6 points total and got Takaki on the podium, I don't see how Ron Dennis won the award. As far as I'm concerned, I'm by far the most worthy of the title, but even Jean Todt deserves it more than Ron Dennis, if you're going purely on the result of the Spanish Grand Prix. In time for the chassis-focused circuit of Monte Carlo, the team finished improving this year's chassis and upping the rating from 60 to 66. That wasn't all though, as since the team has so much money and makes more with every race we do, and since our design department's effort is at 121%, I did a second round of development testing to start work on improving the chassis for a second time. A dry qualifying session in Monte Carlo ended with Frentzen on pole, followed by both McLarens in second and third. Fisichella was the leading Ferrari driver in fourth, and then it's Moreira and both Williams who got the better of my main man, Takaki. Takaki also bested Michael Schumacher, who had a shocking session by his standards as he qualified in 9th. That, I believe, is the first time we've ever had one of my drivers beat Schumacher in a qualifying session. However, that success can be contrasted with the fact Ricardo Rosset for Minardi beat the other Stewart driver of Pedro Diniz. Mika Salo beat Eddie Irvine by 5 thousandths of a second. Montemini got the better of Collard, who paled in comparison to his teammate, and Alesi was the slowest driver not in the bottom 3 teams. Of those 6 drivers, Wirtz headed the way 1.9 seconds off Alesi's qualifying time. The amount of clouds in the sky increased from Saturday to Sunday, but it remained dry throughout the weekend. David Coulthard got the jump on pole sitter Frentzen to win the Grand Prix by 26 seconds. Frentzen led a 5-car train as he beat Fisichella by 100th of a second, and then it's Moreira in 4th, yet only half a second behind his teammate. Pedro Diniz finished in 5th and even beat Michael Schumacher, who had a very underwhelming Monaco Grand Prix, as he started ahead of Diniz yet was still overtaken by him around Monaco of all places. Rosset just missed out on scoring a point for Minardi, even if he did finish the race 27 seconds after Schumacher. However, Rosset was able to beat Johnny Herbert in a Williams as well as both Jordans. Damon Hill retired for about the 1000th time in his career, and this time it was entirely his fault. Tuero's suspension failed on him, Takaki's brakes failing potentially cost him some points, although when he retired he was behind both Diniz and Schumacher. Afterwards, I complained about Benetton's level 1 automatic gears, but the complaint was not upheld as the FIA said it doesn't break any technical regulations. That's as may be, but the FIA still don't officially recognise it, and in fact, Benetton haven't officially registered a new driver aid with the FIA since the end of 1999. McLaren did a deal with Total for fuel next year, and Laurent Redon has agreed to race for Jordan. Race being the operative word, as since Eddie Irvine is the only Jordan driver to vacate his seat next season, Redon will be partnering Alesi to give Jordan an all-French race driver lineup. Irvine will be going to Minardi, which is a very bold call indeed. Logically, he should just fill up Rossett's seat at the team, but that does mean Minardi will have Collard and Irvine out racing, whilst Barrichello is wasting away only doing testing. Ralf Schumacher will leave Ferrari to go to arch rivals Benetton, which also means both Schumacher brothers will still be at the same team and possibly racing alongside one another. Finally, Peter Sauber was named as the worst manager of the month, and David Richards of Benetton the best manager. Next up is the Canadian Grand Prix, where David Coulthard set the fastest time in qualifying. Moreira was the surprise second quickest driver as he beat both Ferraris headed by Schumacher. Tuero pulled off a brilliant lap to see him in 5th, beating Frentzen and Takaki. Herbert and Hill were beaten by one Stewart driver, but will start the race ahead of the other one, Diniz. After that is both Minardi's, Sarlo, both Jordans, and then Montemini in the other Tyrrell. Vert, true to tradition, was 1.9 seconds off the next fastest driver as he bested both Prost, his own teammate, and finally both Saubers, who were the only ones to qualify in the 1 minute 22s. The dry qualifying session was followed with a dry race, a race won by Frentzen after starting from 6th. Coulthard finished in 2nd and Fisichella 3rd for the 2nd race in a row. Surprisingly, the bottom 3 points positions were taken by Esteban Tuero in a Williams, Takaki for Stewart, and finally Moreira for Benetton. Montemini, Rossett and Alesi just missed out on scoring any points, which gives you an indication as to how many top name drivers retired from the race. Those include Damon Hill again, Johnny Herbert, Pedro Diniz and Michael Schumacher, who finished the previous 3 races, but this retirement is his 4th this season already. I complained for a second time about Benetton's automatic gears, but again, nothing came of it. In other news, Williams signed a team sponsorship deal with East. I was, for some reason, named as the least effective manager in Formula 1, whilst Ron Dennis was named as the best manager, when I, again, don't think he was quite the best one. I was able to secure a works engine deal with Mercedes-Benz. That's the highest level of deal with a supplier that wouldn't even talk to us in 1998, and a deal with the best engine manufacturer out there where they will pay us $11.8 million. I also signed a works deal with Michelin for 2 years. They'll be new to the sport and largely unproven, but it's them having no prior arrangements with any teams, plus Stefano Domenicali's wonderful negotiation ability that got us a works deal with them. So on to the French Grand Prix at Magny-Cours, and yet again Coulthard had a fantastic session as he starts from pole position for the 2nd race in a row, with his teammate Damon Hill 2nd in qualifying, making it an all McLaren front row. Frentzen and Schumacher complete the 2nd row with Moreira and Diniz the 3rd. Unusually, Diniz was the best performing Stewart driver, and by a long way, as in descending order, Herbert, Rossett, Fisichella, Montemini and Collard all set a slower time than Diniz, but faster than Takaki could manage as he starts the race all the way down in 13th. Only one McLaren driver finished the race, and shockingly, it was Damon Hill. He won the French Grand Prix, beating Michael Schumacher by 2.5 seconds. Moreira ensured Benetton had one of their drivers on the podium, but it was him and not Frentzen, who started in 3rd and lost 5 positions over the course of the race. Conversely, Fisichella gained 6 places from where he started to finish in 4th, with Herbert finishing in 5th and Pedro Diniz scoring 1 point for Stewart with a 6th place finish. Takaki turned his poor starting position into a respectable finishing position, but ultimately he scored no points. Yet he has the bragging rights of beating Frentzen, who drives a much quicker car and started the race 10 places ahead of him. Both of Tyrrell's drivers retired due to separate mechanical issues, but the only big name to leave the race early was Coulthard and with an unknown fault. Coulthard's retirement cost him the lead of the Drivers' Championship, but he's still only 1 point behind Frentzen, who now leads it. Schumacher and Moreira are both within 7 points of the top, and then it's Fisichella and Takaki who both still technically have an outside chance at the title. In reality, Damon Hill probably has a better chance of winning it despite being 1 point behind a Stewart driver. In between the Canadian and French Grand Prix, McLaren signed a team sponsor deal with Playlife, and the only other newsworthy news is that Giancarlo Minardi was named as the least favourite manager and Jean Todt, motorsport fans' favourite manager. The next race was the British Grand Prix, and of course, after a run of entirely dry Grand Prix, the qualifying session at Silverstone was met with heavy rain. Unfortunately, I didn't apply any setup points to my car's wet weather ability, as I'd already used those points at a different race. That was a stupid decision on my part, as I should have expected it to rain in Britain, and we paid the price, as Diniz qualified in 9th and Takaki all the way down in 17th. Michael Schumacher took pole position by 1.5 seconds. Hill qualified in 2nd and Peter Lacey in 3rd by 1 second. Frentzen was the fastest non-rain specialist and the 4th fastest overall. Irvine surprised as he finished in 5th and 4 tenths behind his teammate. Mika Salo equally did brilliantly in the 1 hour session, as he set a faster time than Fisichella, Coulthard and Diniz. Diniz did get the better of Moreira by 8 tenths of a second, which proves just how awful Moreira still is in the wet, even if he's proven himself to a certain extent in the dry. Collard and Nakano just about made it, whilst Magnussen was over 7 tenths off the 107% time, with Zonta 1 second back. That begs the question as to how slow Sarrazin was, as both Magnussen and Zonta were cleared to race, but Sarrazin wasn't. The heavy rain died down to only light rain for the race, but even still the Rainmaster of Damon Hill won the British Grand Prix by 1 minute and 18 seconds over Frentzen in 2nd. Lacey finished in 3rd, proving his blistering race pace in the rain, and he was the final driver not to be lapped. Coulthard, Irvine and Diniz were the final 3 drivers to finish in the points, and Herbert in 7th was the final driver not to be lapped twice. Salo, Rosset, Trulli, Tuero and Nakano finished ahead of Takaki. Both Prost drivers beat one of our own. That's how awful Takaki is on a wet track. To his credit, he did at least finish, and he was the 2nd slowest finisher, beating Zonta, who was lapped a staggering 4 times. Arrows are the latest team to nab a team sponsor, and they were able to get Winfried, one of the biggest backers in the business. Benetton are the 2nd team to do a deal with Michelin, and Williams signed an agreement with Goodyear. Benetton also announced they'll be buying fuel from Elf, Jordan will be getting 3 tyres from Bridgestone, and finally, Tom Walkinshaw is officially fans' new least favourite manager, with Ron Dennis yet again considered the best manager currently in Formula 1. In time for the Austrian Grand Prix, the team manufactured our 2nd chassis update. That takes the rating up to 72%, 12% higher than it was at the start of the season. The 5th race in the video is the 2001 Austrian Grand Prix, and is back to dry conditions now we've left Britain. 4 different teams occupied the top 4 positions, with Frentzen for Benetton on pole position. Coulthard 2nd, Schumacher 3rd, and then Diniz was by far the best performing Stewart driver with a remarkable 4th place. He was quicker than Fisichella and both Williams. Even Jean Lacey was faster than Damon Hill, who was only just ahead of Toru Takaki in 10th. The entirety of the top 14 were within a second of each other. I know it's a short lap, but that is still quite something. Whilst everyone except Salo qualified in the 1 minute 11s, Prost were in the 1:13s, and Arrows and Sauber were in the 1 minute 14s. Frentzen's pole position time could well have been set illegally, as his teammate was found to be running an unapproved driver aid, so won't start the race. After the full Grand Prix distance was completed, Michael Schumacher came out on top, pipping pole sitter Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Fisichella made it a Ferrari 1-3, with Hill recovering from his poor qualifying performance to take 4th and finish ahead of both Williams in the final 2 points places. Alesi and both Tyrrells just missed out on the top 6 again, partially due to the fact both Stewart drivers retired. Diniz had a hydraulics failure and Takaki had an accident, meaning our rivals Williams outscored us by 3 points. David Coulthard was the other regular point scorer who retired and with a Ferrari engine failure. Coulthard's non-finish and Schumacher's race win saw the two of them swap places in the Drivers' Championship. Frentzen still leads the way with a 7-point advantage over his fellow countryman and 10 points over David Coulthard. Damon Hill is in 4th with Fisichella and Moreira in joint 5th. Takaki is the best of the rest, but only 1 point ahead of Herbert. Meanwhile, the other Stewart driver is just ahead of the other Williams of Tuero, again by just 1 point. Moreira's disqualification obviously harmed Benetton's championship charge, and it brings up a very sore point. I don't know exactly what driver aid got Moreira kicked out of the race, but I know they've been running this undeclared automatic transmission for a while. I've complained about it twice, and both times the FIA said there's nothing wrong with it. I complained about it again, and this time they noted my complaint and said they'll keep a closer eye on Benetton. That's it. And I'm sorry, but either it's legal and you can't disqualify them from races, or it's illegal and you take the system away from them. You can't just deny that it's illegal and then eventually, after I prompted you for the 3rd time, say you'll look into it, and yet still don't actually do anything. In more official news, Prost, despite their poor on-track performances, were still able to convince team sponsor Blondes to back them for 2002. McLaren will be leaving Ferrari and going back to Mercedes next year. Given their latest engine failure, that makes perfect sense. Arrows are the 3rd and final team to receive Mercedes engines next year, except they'll be on a partner deal. Williams will be leaving Mechachrome to go to Ford for their engines, which means we might finally see the back of Mechachrome from Formula 1. Finally, Alain Prost was voted the least effective manager in F1 and Jean Todt the best. The second to last race of the episode is the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, and Michael Schumacher took pole position despite running the Ford engine. Coulthard qualified in 2nd and Fisichella in 3rd, with Hill, Frentzen and Diniz rounding out the top 6. Takaki finished way down in 13th, despite being the quickest Stewart driver throughout most of the season, and using a Mercedes engine at this power circuit. The most standout achievement was Sauber breaking out of the hopeless gang and going into the rest of the field. Zonta qualified in 15th, beating Montemini, and even the slower driver of Sarrazin bested the Minardi driver of Collard. Michael Schumacher won his home Grand Prix, but with both McLaren drivers trailing him, Coulthard by 3 seconds and Hill by 30. Eddie Irvine in his Mercedes-powered Jordan got the better of us, despite using the same engine, although it is entirely possible they have received an upgrade from the firm or even developed one themselves. Meanwhile, we're still running with the stock Mercedes engine they gave us at the start of the season, which was still good enough to see Diniz cross the line in 5th and ahead of Moreira in 6th. Takaki finished 5 places higher up than he started, but behind the other Jordan driver of Alesi. He did, however, beat the only Williams driver to make the checkered flag, which was Herbert. 7 drivers ended their running in the race early, including Frentzen at his home Grand Prix, as well as Fisichella with an engine failure. The Constructors' Championship deserves a quick mention, as now McLaren lead the way and Ferrari are 2nd. Benetton haven't dropped too far back though, as they're still only 4 points off the top, so it's still a 3-way title fight. The press confirmed a load of new deals, including one between Williams and Petrobras, Arrows and Goodyear, Jordan and Total, McLaren and Michelin, Minardi and Texaco, as well as Sauber and Goodyear. Most interestingly, Prost have renewed their deal with Ferrari engines for another year. The FIA also proudly announced they will increase the thoroughness of their scrutineering at future races. I've never seen that announcement in this game before, and I can only assume it's a response to the pressure I put on them over Benetton's simultaneously legal and illegal automatic gears that still have no official recognition. Frank Williams was boldly named as the worst manager in F1, whilst Ron Dennis won the Best Manager award again, and this time totally justifiably. To prove just how far we've improved our efficiency behind the scenes, we finished designing next year's car before the Hungarian Grand Prix, and that was with only 50% of the design staff working on it, and the other 50% have spent the whole season improving the current chassis multiple times. I was getting worried since we hadn't received a single improved component from any of our suppliers. We're hurtling towards the end of the season, but finally, just before the 12th of 16 races this season, Mercedes gave us an improved engine and Goodyear a better intermediate compound tyre. The new engine is better than our tuned first model by 1 in heat, power and reliability. The new intermediate tyres are better by 1 in every rating except the temperature stat, which has been upped by 2. So it's a big upgrade and arguably worth the excruciatingly long wait. It's just a shame then that the qualifying session for the Hungarian Grand Prix was held on not just a dry track, but a very dry track. Michael Schumacher took his second straight pole position with Coulthard second and Fisichella third. Moreira headed a Benetton 4-5 with Damon Hill in 6th and besting Diniz by under half a tenth of a second. Eddie Irvine split the two Stewart drivers and then the two Williams sandwich a Lacey in the other Jordan. The latest batch of car upgrades gave us our first podium finish in this episode as Tora Takagi finished in 3rd place. Schumacher won the 2001 Hungarian Grand Prix with Damon Hill in 2nd. Takagi finished 9 seconds ahead of Moreira and Fisichella, who were separated by less than a tenth of a second across the line. Johnny Herbert finished in 6th, with the two Jordans as the highest placed drivers not to score any points. 8 drivers retired, including Coulthard, who suffered his second engine-related retirement in 3 races, whilst Frentzen retired from his second successive race. Pedro Diniz also retired, and we can't learn from it or act upon it, because we have no idea why his car stopped working. Michael Schumacher has won the past 3 races, which means he now leads the Drivers' Championship by 13 points. Coulthard and Hill are tied on 40 points, with Moreira trailing them by 11, but he's ahead of Fisichella by 2 points. Takagi is an impressive 7th in the championship, 4 points ahead of Herbert and 9 ahead of his teammate. McLaren held the Constructors' Championship lead for 1 race, as now Ferrari are 4 points ahead of them. They're still in 2nd and 7 points ahead of once runaway leaders, Benetton. Stewart's lead over Williams has stretched to 7 points, and finally there's Jordan on 10 points and Tyrrell on 2. And that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode for the Belgian and Italian Grand Prix.